top story of the week. It's quick questions about op return, quick answers here. This is a Prism post, Bitcoin territory, May 4th, from Tidwell. 200 comments, 27,000 sats. All or half of it, or 51% of it, was forwarded to merch. I think this is the most commented post we ever had in the number one spot. To be honest, um,
Hmm,
Keyan, what's
maybe.
this?
Yeah. I don't know if it's the most we've ever had in the number one spot. It's certainly like
Most
one of the.
commented? I think so. I
It
think
would,
I think we capped at 165. I keep track of this in my head. I think 165 is the most comments we ever had in the number one post.
okay. Well, I don't know how to go back and look at number one post. It's like top 10, I think, most comments of any post. Um, so a lot of comments, and most of them is merch, like very patiently answering every possible question that comes across this thread about op return. Uh, anyway, this thread is dedicated toward answering people's questions about off return, and so Tidwell organized it. He had a bunch of questions about op return that he wanted to ask merch, and I guess he needed a place to ask them, so they decided to do it on Stacker.News. So Tidwell created this post, put all of his questions in the post, and then merch goes through and asks them, and then anyone else is welcome to come along and follow up, ask follow-up questions, or ask their own questions in here, and merch answers them. And it's a fantastic resource if you're concerned about off return and what's actually going on. You can really hear in great detail what is actually going on and what's at stake. Um, and merch is probably one of the most patient people in Bitcoin, also one of the most knowledgeable people in Bitcoin, and makes himself super available to help. He's been an admin of the Bitcoin Stack Exchange and loves answering questions well and helping educate people. He taught me a lot of what I know about Bitcoin through Chain Code Labs, uh, and so I mad respect for merch, and he continues to do a great job here. He hasn't lost it. Anyway, that's mostly what this thread is about, is uh, people asking questions about op return and merch answering them. And if anyone isn't familiar with op return and what's going on with op return, is there was a PR submitted to the Bitcoin Core repo by Peter Todd, I believe, where it removed the standardness rule for op return. I believe it was limited to 80 bytes, like basically most, which means most Bitcoin nodes would not relay transactions that had op returns in excess of 80 bytes. And this PR would remove that limit and allow an op return of, I believe, not arbitrary length, but whatever the consensus rules are, for op returns. So no special treatment for op returns is basically what this PR did. And it basically makes the mempool policy exactly the same as Bitcoin consensus. So things that are valid in blocks. And yeah, this upset a faction of Bitcoiners who hate things like op return and hate things that aren't explicitly financial in Bitcoin blocks. And they saw this sort of as an attack or a signal from Bitcoin Core that they want more arbitrary data in Bitcoin. But I think that's far from the case. I think it's on some level quite more complex than that, but on another level is also pretty simple. And I don't think this is even that dramatic of a thing. I don't think it matters that much. I've been describing this mostly as like a fire drill, where we're all sort of like testing whether we can disagree and get along, and whether people are paying attention, and where people stand. It's more like a test than it is anything of real consequence itself. And anyway, there's like a lot here. There's a lot of great content out there now, but this thread will give you a great handle on Bitcoin Core's point of view on it and their understanding of the opposition to this change. Yeah, that's the thread.
Yeah. I mean, we covered a lot of it last week. It was so fresh last week. I mean, it was fresh in everybody's mind. And just last week, dude, it was, I mean, you should have saw it, dude. Like everybody in the lab was just like up in arms, and then yeah, I mean, they were all trying to figure it out, and then we're right next to the commons, so we had people like Parker coming over trying to get the guys to answer questions for him, and then they were going back and forth, and then for me, I was just kind of like, you know, I'm just over it, dude. Just because
Yeah.
it's all stuff that's just like, because like for me these days, like I'm focused more on founder stuff and like, and more on the business side of things about Bitcoin than on kind of the dev stuff, to be honest. It doesn't mean that I don't care. It's more on the peripheral side of my viewpoint and stuff. And so for me it's just like, it's just not at the top of my, it's the stuff that doesn't affect me. I think the stuff that actually does affect me is more like the tether stuff, the stuff that we were just talking about in the last post. It's the rehypothecation. All that stuff actually affects my business more so than this kind of stuff, I would say. Um, but yeah, you know, I don't know. What are your thoughts on it, Keon? I mean, how do you feel about all this stuff? I don't know. Have you been paying attention to it? I know you were on vacation last week. Um, yeah, how do you feel about it? About it?
And I think in general, I agree with the reasoning of the Bitcoin Core team and their justifications for it, which are basically removing this off return limit will prevent people from causing more damage by getting around the off return limit, and it also makes the standardness rule or the mempool policy for op return limits uh, symmetrical or congruent with the consensus rules, meaning that it makes things simpler because it like removes rules that aren't really doing much good. And in fact, in some cases, which was the motivation for the PR, they're actually doing harm. They're causing people to store data in a more hazardous way to node runners. And so this, in some cases, will prevent that from happening. And so that's better. And in a code maintenance way, it's better to not have code that isn't really used or useful. Um, there are a number of points that you can make on why this is good. Why this is bad from the perspective of people like Luke Dasher and the Knots team seems to be primarily that this kind of they think it suggests to people that Bitcoin is for arbitrary data storage and kind of encourages it. And sort of a slippery slope will begin allowing more and more of this kind of stuff now that it's in there, and it'll be used more. And we sort of need to put our foot down, even if it's going to happen anyway. We need to be like socially signaling, declaring that we don't want this stuff by having these limits on it. And even if we have evidence that that's ineffective and actually has like first and second order consequences that are even worse than what we're trying to prevent, it doesn't matter. We need to put our foot down. We need to shout at people storing data. So in general, I'm as far as this issue is concerned, I think this change is good. I like it. I think it's the right thing to do. I heard a great perspective from the Braid Pool developer. I forget his name exactly, but really smart guy. And he said in either case, this is a bad idea. He's like, if we were adding this filter for the first time, it's a bad idea. Adding filters is bad because it creates sort of regulatory risk. Because if we're suggesting that we can filter things from Bitcoin transactions, it invites a regulator to come and say, you should filter these OFAC addresses. You should filter this. You should filter that. And so even suggesting we have the power to filter when we really don't, it's ineffective. But even just like suggesting out into the world that we have the ability to filter invites regulators. And then
Oh
on the
wow.
other side, he said removing this limit, does have this consequence of allowing these non-monetary use cases to operate a little more efficiently in some, at least in a kind of conceptual way, on Bitcoin. And that's bad too. And so he said, it's kind of a dilemma. There's actually no one of these decisions is actually better. And his argument is, because we're in this dilemma and not one of them is clearly better, he's like, we should just keep it as it is. And, we shouldn't be fighting over this. It's a distraction, etc. And so I thought that was a great perspective. So you kind of have yes, no, and then you have this perspective, which is,
That's actually
we shouldn't
probably
do anything.
that's actually kind of the better. Actually, that's probably the smartest path, right? I love that. It's probably better just to not to do anything. When you don't have consensus, it's best not to do anything.
I mean, it's, you're not going to have consensus for a lot of this stuff. And the nice thing about the mempool policy stuff is you can run an alternative set of mempool policies and still be in consensus with the chain. So you can run knots, have even more strict op return limits and other, a variety of other limits that Luke Dasher showed off at the conference this week. And you can run knots and still be in consensus with everyone running Bitcoin Core. And then you can also on the other side, you can run another implementation with a different mempool policy that Peter Todd has implemented called Libra Relay, which basically has very liberal standardness rules and helps things like this get to miners. But anyway, what's nice about this is like there's a fair, it's like about the level of complexity is very low, but it's still high enough to create a lot of interesting discussion. And that's why I feel like it's really gone viral and everyone wants to talk about it.
Yeah. Interesting. Um yeah, I'm kind of through with it at this point.
Yeah, I think
I'm
most
kind of
people are.
I'm
I
through
think
with it.
most people.
I mean, I don't really I don't really care either or, to be honest. Like I've always said like the devs need to figure it out. Like just figure it out. I mean, we all have our own lanes that we work in individually. So they need to figure it out. Or the devs and the miners, I guess, or whoever in charge of all that stuff. I thought this was interesting though. I don't know if you saw this, but MBK was taking shots at you. Uh, so Tidwell posted this on Twitter. EK told me about this. So Tidwell was posted that he's doing a. Let me see if this shows up. Yeah, he posted that he was doing a post because this post went like pretty crazy with all the comments and stuff. He said, "Hey, I'm doing this post on Stacker.News. If anybody wants to come check it out." This was like on Sunday evening, and then NBK comes in and goes, "Do it on Noster." And then Tidwell says, "Stacker cross post. Do you still cross post? You can still cross post from Stacker.News, right?" And
Yeah.
then so that was it, right? And then I think almost immediately here. Let me go back here. Where was it at? Uh, Almost immediately, MBK goes, "Don't post on walled gardens." He said he called Stacker.News a walled garden, Keyan. And then Tidwell says, "By the way, for what it's worth, I think you're right, and I love Noster." And then Tidwell stood up for you. He goes, "Let's define walled garden. You don't even." He said, "You don't even need a login to view and post on Stacker.News because you can post as a non." He goes, "But for X, for instance, and obviously a Nostr relay can enforce fee structures. Stacker.News is fine on the spectrum walled garden." And he goes, and then MBK says, "I had so much hope for you, Tidwell. Disappoint You must. And then Tidwell keeps going back at him, and he goes, if you want to explain what you mean or your definition of a walled garden, I'm all ears, but you lost me. I'm serious. And then MBK says, you can't comment without an account. If they go away, the article goes away. It has a sysadmin. And then Tidwell says, you can post and comment as a non without an account. I think I get your point though, but I challenge you to think about walled gardens in more than just the aspect of how decentrally centralized controlled it is. Openness and interoperability are two big ones to also consider. So I don't think NVK understands what I don't think he understands what a walled garden is, Keyan.
I don't think to be honest, I've had a few discussions with Envy. He's so opinionated and spends so much time on X, which is, I would, I mean, if Stacker News is a walled garden, X is a walled garden, and he's maybe one of the most
But
active people in that walled garden that I can think of in Bitcoin. I don't know of anyone else who tweets more than he does.
is it possible he thinks X is not a walled garden though?
I think I think he does think about it as a walled garden, but
No,
he
but do
doesn't
you think
care.
he thinks but does he think Twitter is not a walled garden because it
He
won't go away?
No, I would guess if you asked him, he would say Twitter is a walled garden. I would say that's what he would say. So he's contradicting himself, but I don't think that's really. So I think really what he means is he's trying to make a sort of disingenuous argument toward Tidwell to basically, it's a really easy argument to make with Bitcoiners. Don't use this thing because it's a walled garden. Yes, I'm contradicting myself and saying this on X. It doesn't matter. All that I care about is that it changes your behavior. I don't care that I'm actually factually right or honest or whatever. I just want to change your behavior, Tidwell.
And
And
then
so that's what he's doing. Yeah. Anyway.
the other thing was funny is because he goes, is also unlikely it will be there in a few years. So I thought that was funny because it was kind of like, I was like, what does he mean by that? Does he mean like Stacker News is going to go away? Like it's just going to go away in a few years? Is that what he's implying there?
Yep.
Is that what he's implying? So this gets me to thinking like, because he's on OpenSats, like NVK is on OpenSats. So I started thinking, I was like, NVK, if you're listening to this, just give Stacker News a grant, and then it'll still be there in a few in a few in a few years. You see how that works? You just give Stacker News a grant, and then Stacker News will be there in a few years. So that way, when you post on Stacker News, you won't have to worry about it not being there. But I also started thinking, and I started realizing the reason he's worried that it won't be there is because all the Nasser stuff that he gives grants to goes away in under a year. So that's why he's worried. He's just lighting up Jack's money on fire. That's all he's doing. He's just lighting up all the OpenSat grant money on fire because they go away in under a year. That's why
Mm,
he's thinking
yeah.
stuff. That's why he's thinking stuff just goes away.
Yeah. I don't. It's weird. It's weird to hear people talk about Stacker News who never use Stacker News or never talk to me about Stacker News or ask anything about Stacker News. But we have more than a few years of runway. So that's one point. Another point is even when I stop working on things like if and I'm not going to stop working on Stacker News as I've said many times. It's like I think it's my life's task, and so whether I have money to work on it or not, I'm going to keep working on it and keeping it up. But the other aspect of this is that I keep the projects that I worked on in the past up. I have projects from 2015, 2016 that I used to operate still running for the purpose of people still use them. I'm going to keep them running, even though they're not, I'm not actively working on them. And
Well,
I don't know. I just might. So that's.
the
I just
the
also think it doesn't matter.
the other thing is kind of weird though, and maybe this is where like you start getting used to working with like grants and stuff, and you forget like in business, this is how businesses work for people that work with grants all the time. You have to build something called moats, and so and so in business, there's this thing called moats, and so you got to build a moat, and you got to make this thing called revenue, and if you don't make revenue, you go out of business. So in order for Stacker News to be successful, you have to build like a moat, and this moat makes businesses successful. And so and so you got to build a moat. Stacker News has to build a moat, but also has to still play within the ecosystem. So it can only do enough to like open that moat so it's not entirely a walled garden, but still build enough of a moat that it plays well with the rest of the ecosystem, but still has enough to build a sustainable business for itself
Well,
to
I want to
offer
stop you
to,
because I want to stop you a little bit because I wouldn't even call. I'm not Stacker News isn't centralized in the way that it is because I want to moat and I need to make revenue. Stacker News is centralized in the way that it is because I haven't given time to decentralizing it. It's not out of interest of it being centralized, and I'm trying to serve business needs. Although that's maybe the most obvious explanation and why someone like NVK who hasn't had a conversation with me and would think that the main reason is we're spending a bunch of time working on the Bitcoin stuff that is weird and no one else is working on and no one gives a shit about because they all just have given up on working on Lightning applications and are either KYC custodial or working on eCash, another custodial solution. And we're trying to make non-custodial stuff work well in the context of an application like Stacker News, which is a lot of stuff with Bitcoin. And that for the time being, it's centralized while we're working on that. We plan on making it decentralized when we can. If we lose the moat, I don't think we do. There's a moat to running a protocol well. There's a moat to providing services on a protocol better than anyone else. And that's what we intend to do. Given enough time. In the meantime, we're just going to people are going to misunderstand what we're doing and they're going to tell people what we're doing and what we are and what's going to happen to us. Like they have a crystal ball and unfortunately they have a huge microphone and a bunch of money from Jack Dorsey and a bunch of friends with microphones and a bunch of money from Jack Dorsey and all the
Keyan,
power in the world.
but Keyan,
I'm just, yeah.
what I'm trying to say is though, like just from my perspective, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with building a moat. That's called building a business, man. Like that's normal. And so
Yeah.
like I know, and I know I'm not saying I'm not speaking for you. I'm just saying like I love that you stopped me and you explained that you're not doing that, and I 100% love that you did that because I know you're not doing that, and I didn't mean to. I
Mm-hmm.
was just being sarcastic, but
Mm-hmm.
just so I can finish this point though, businesses should do that though. This is normal business building, and this is normal. This is like the restaurant down the street here does that, and then there's another Mexican restaurant down the street that's competing with them, and they're both offering the same burrito. Like it's normal. Like and so like I don't think people should be up in arms when businesses in Bitcoin do that. It's the same reason I'm sure NVK does this with people that battle his company. So that's what I'm trying to say though. It's just kind of dumb that like this kind of stuff goes on, and it's just like let Tidwell pick where he wants to get the most visibility. If you think he can get the most visibility on Stacker News, then he's going to pick Stacker News. He's not going to pick Noster because Noster is not efficient for this kind of conversation, right? Like he could have picked Abla as whatever that place is called, but he didn't pick there. He picked Stacker News. That's it. Anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Do you
Yeah.
have any final thoughts?
I think the only thing I wanted to add is I think Tidwell chose the venue because there was a lot of spam in the GitHub thread around this change, and also the format on Stacker News is very conducive to having these kinds of back and forth conversations, unlike other formats. And so I think that's the reason he chose Stacker News to do it, is because we have this gentle Sybil resistance in the form of Bitcoin payments. So it's, we're doing Bitcoin stuff. And then the format's also good. And, I don't think, NVK, I think NVK is like one of the people who I think holds the, strong opinions loosely held is kind of probably his motto. And, it just lends itself to all these kind of him saying a lot of things that are, sort of not great. And so I just accept that for what it is. And I don't think people who are using Stacker News are not using Nostr. In fact, I would guess that most stackers use Nostr, and we probably introduced a bunch of stackers to Nostr. And a bunch of people on Nostr have found Stacker News through Nostr and use Stacker News. I don't think it's a zero. I think part of the motivation behind NVK's comments is that he views it as like a zero sum game.
Dude, all those guys do,
Where
dude. They
If
all do.
Stacker.News wins, then Noster loses. If
They all
Noster
they
wins,
all
that's Stacker.
they all all those old heads in Bitcoin all view it as a zero sum game. That's how they view it, dude. All those old
Well,
heads, dude.
accumulating Bitcoin sort of is, so I could get how
But
that
not
might infect them
accumulating
with.
community. An accumulating community is
Yeah.
not like that, but all those old guys do, dude. That's why it's so like it's so weird, man. Those guys are so weird. They need to find God, bro. It's so weird. Anyways, yeah. Anyways, it's our turn. So basically, what they did, they hit the ping pong on our side. We just slapped it back to them. Let's see if they slap it back to us. That's how that works. This is how rappers do it. The rappers will hit it to one rapper, and then the other rapper will hit it back to them, and then that's how you do it. Keep the drama going.
Yeah, I don't think we're like Nas or